right. Hello, everyone. I am very, very excited to be here today. Just so you know, I wore my COVID fancy clothes for you. Instead of just a comfy t-shirt, I wore a comfy t-shirt with rhinestones. You know, we got to level it up when we're giving big talks. So I thought I would start by giving a little bit of a background about myself and then getting into the talk. Um, I have an undergraduate degree in mathematics. I was going to say computer science, but that's not true. It's in mathematics. And so actually when I was in high school trying to determine what I wanted to do with my career, I went to the career counselor and I said, I really like math and stuff. And then he said, well, oh, okay, you're like a woman, so you should be a teacher. And, naive 17-year-old self me said, oh, okay. So I ended up going to school to become a math teacher. And very quickly, I learned that I was much more interested in the mathematics than building relationships with children. Don't get me wrong. I love children. I just love the math more. So it wasn't even until my third year of university that I discovered computer science because all my friends in humanities told me it was a really hard class, so I had put it off. And then I realized that as I was in my first few classes, that this was like possibly one of the most exciting things to be doing because it was taking my love of mathematics and making it real. It was like a practical application of my mathematical brain. And so about a year and a half later, I joined the co-op program, and that's when I discovered cybersecurity and cryptography. I ended up working for the federal government, and my first job was actually to help evaluate the Bluetooth protocol for whether or not it was secure enough. And obviously it's not very secure, but great for pairing things. And I spent that co-op term building Bluetooth in C++ from the spec. And that was great fun. And so when it came time to like deciding what I was going to do with my life, I still had, a few months of school left. And I thought, I don't even know what to do. And this, of course, was when the the internet bubble was bursting in about 2001. And I thought, I don't know, I could go to school. I could just try and find a job. I'll just try and find a job. And I walked, I'll step back. I had thought about going and getting a master's degree. So I went and I asked some of the math professors there, do you think I could go to grad school? And the male professor told me, well, like, what are your grades? And I was like, oh, they're like, it's like a 3.8 out of 4. And they're like, oh, well, I guess. And so that kind of discouraged me. And I was walking down the hallway, and this amazing female professor that worked at the school I ran into me and said, Dinah, I haven't seen any of your applications for NSERC scholarships for master's programs. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do it. She's like, well, what are your grades? I'm like 3.8 out of 4. She's like, exactly. You should be applying right now. And so that's how I ended up at the University of Waterloo, getting a master's degree in cryptography. And after that, I was able to get my dream job at Blackberry and work on the Blackberry security team. We called it the crypto team. And there was about 5 of us at the time. It was before there was 1 million Blackberry users. And we really built security for Blackberry. And so it was pretty amazing to live on that bleeding edge of technology and cryptography and mobile technology. So I worked there for a while, about like 8 years, started leading teams there. And then we all know the story of Blackberry. So I decided I would go find something else to do. Went to a couple other companies, left cybersecurity for a little while. And then 6 years ago, came back into it, leading the development organization at Arctic Wolf. So that gives you a little bit of a background on me. And now I'm going to get into what this like career building formula thing I've been, you came to see is all about. So, oh, hold on. There we go. All right. So, one of the biggest things when you're trying to grow your career is not knowing how to get to that next level. And a lot of people focus really far ahead and trying to go like, I want to go really far. I want to become a VP one day, or I want to do this one day. And the best thing you can do is look around and try and tackle the issues that no one else is addressing and be the one to pick them up and try and solve them, because that's going to get you noticed in your company, right? If you care about the things no one else cares about and they're going to help the business, then you look like somebody who, is an up and comer, is a go-getter, is a problem solver. And those are all really good things as far as progressing your career goes. So this is all well and easy to say, okay, just go tackle all the issues no one else is addressing. The biggest issue with that is, how do you find them? How do you find these issues that no one else is addressing? So this is where the formula comes in, because, as you heard, math background. And so I like to think in formulas. So how do you spot a problem? So let's just think about it in the context of a corporation or the office you work in today, or your virtual office that you work in today. So the first thing you want to look for is, where is the frustration happening? Where are people frustrated? Are they on Slack telling you about how annoyed they are that this process is the way it is, or that, whatever it might be? Then you can also look for where the bad communication is, right? So again, you're getting stuff on Slack from people. Oh, so-and-so said this, but they didn't know what they were talking about. And, the product team thinks we're going to be delivering it by this date, but we're actually not. It's going to be by this date. And then the third thing to look for is where are the mistakes? Where are the mistakes happening? So, if you think about that, like wherever there's frustration, there's bad communication, and then people start making mistakes because, maybe a process in your organization isn't well laid out. People don't know what to do next. And so they just kind of do random things. So what I'm going to do, because this is still fairly abstract, I'm going to talk through a few examples of how corporations have done this in the consumer market. I'm going to talk through a couple examples of how I've done this in the corporate environment, and then we're going to think about how you can do this. Okay. Please feel free to throw questions in the chat at any time. I'm very happy to answer them. We have, about an hour for this, and the talk itself is about 30-ish minutes. So there's time for me to answer questions. If I can, I'll do it during, and otherwise I will pick them up at the end. So please do throw in your questions into the chat. Okay, so let's think about this formula in action in the consumer market. And my first example is going to be Blackberry, because obviously I had experience at Blackberry, but they did something pretty incredible, right? They changed how the world works, right? Before Blackberry, everyone had to be wired in to a wall to do any kind of work, right? And they changed that entirely, so that like they created the smartphone, right? So we can work anywhere, even just on our phones now. So let's think about this in the context of the formula. So first is, where's the frustration? Well, we all have to be wired in to do any kind of real work, right? So you can't just, get a quick call, or, well, you could get a quick call. I mean, some people had cell phones then. I personally did not, but some people did. They were quite expensive, but and then, but you couldn't do any two-way texting or anything like that at the time. Where's the bad communication happening? Well, okay, a lot of people, like, if they needed to be contacted, wore pagers, right? Like old pagers. And those pagers were one-way communication devices, right? So you would get a phone number, you would look at it, and then you would have to go find a payphone. I don't know if you remember those things, but they did exist. For those of you who are too young, it was a wired into a wall. See, it's like this one. And so you would have to get that, go find it, and then give it a call. And, that's wasting valuable time. There was no way to like tell them you were coming. Like they didn't, somebody on the other line is just like sitting there waiting, hoping you saw your page and are going to find a phone to call back to you. Oops, wrong way. And then mistakes happened. So, if you needed to work, you probably had to be at work. And so that put strain on the family because you weren't home on time, or maybe, you had to work a little bit later, then you missed your train, and you couldn't get home on time. And so there's a lot of stuff like that happening. So how did Blackberry solve this? Well, they saw all these things happening in the market, right? And they started to create a solution, which was, they figured, we have pagers. Could we make that communication go two ways? Is it possible for that communication to go two ways? And if we could, then, there's these hours that people spend on public transit that they could clear through their email and spend more time with their families. Or if you're on call, you don't have to make sure you're near a phone at any time, because you could text back and forth. And like the very first Blackberry did not have a phone on it. It was a two-way pager, right? The addition of the phone was a later thing, a great innovation, right? But the very first ones were basically just two-way pagers. So by looking at the frustrations that there were in the market where there was bad communication and mistakes happening, they were able to come up with a solution that ended up like revolutionizing how we work. And by accident, inventing the smartphone, basically. Any questions about that? I think maybe it takes a little bit of time for them to come through. So if there is, then I will come back to it. Okay, let's think of another phenomenal example of this, which would be Netflix. And Netflix, in another talk I do about vision for startups, Netflix did a good job of finding the frustrations and the bad communication and the mistakes multiple times in their history, right? And this is what you want to do, right? It's not like you're just going to do this once. You're going to do this, and then you're going to find the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it'll build on itself, right? So let's think about the world before Netflix. If you were alive then, or if you were, at least old enough to know, that you would spend your Friday night by going to Blockbuster, and you would try and hope that the new releases weren't all gone. See, this person here might have been somewhat lucky because all the new releases were like half gone, the white ones indicating that it was gone. So you might have gotten the movie you wanted. But if they were all gone, you maybe went with your friends and you were all disappointed because you really wanted to watch that new release. And so then you had to argue for with some bad communication, argue about which movie you were actually going to watch, which older one no one wanted to really watch. And then maybe you brought that home with you, and then you didn't even end up watching it, and you forgot you had it at all. And by Tuesday, Blockbuster called and they wanted your late fees. So this was the environment that Netflix was starting their service in. And the very first Netflix service was actually a mail-in service. So what you would do is they had a website. It was, it was the .com era, so they did have a website. You would go on and you would choose the movies you liked, that you wanted to watch. And then you would pay for a plan where they would send you 1 or 2 or 3 at a time. And you would get them in the mail in these nice slick little envelopes, because it was DVDs and not VHS. And you would, you could watch the movie and then you pop it back in the mail, and when they got it, they sent you the next one. And so you had this constant stream of movies you could watch, and that was fantastic. There was no late fees, and you always had a movie on hand. It did have its detractions, and that's where, like, you can go down this path quite far and see what they did next and what they did next and what they did next. But basically, they saw this one frustration and then took and looked at it each time. And now they've built basically a global entertainment network that, like, builds its own content and everything. And it started with just this. So that's a great example of how you can see how people have done that in the market. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, oh, thank you, very nostalgic. It is, right? What we used to do on a Friday night. All right, so Code Like a Girl. Code Like a Girl is a global publication that I founded in 2015. And I ran for 3 years. And when I handed it off to my to a friend of mine who decided to take it over for me, we had about 3,000 hits a day. Now, when I started Code Like a Girl, whom I'll take a step back here and say the goal of Code Like a Girl was to change perceptions of women in technology, to help get more girls involved in STEM and technology, and to help male allies know what they could do to help, because many of them wanted to help but just did not know how. I did not start that thinking I was going to create a global publication. So what happened was, one of the companies that I had gone to after Blackberry had a very toxic culture. And previous to that, I'd kind of, been hiding the fact that I was a woman, not like in how I dressed, but in how I acted in the office, right? Like, I wanted to be one of the guys. I didn't want my career to be impacted by the fact that I was a woman. I didn't want them to think of me like that. I just wanted them to think of me as one of the team, as a great software developer. And so I would, try and know stuff about what they liked and all of that kind of thing. And I kind of feared being found out a feminist. And after this really horrible experience where I worked for a misogynistic, very bully of a boss, and that person was able to take my self-esteem down to 0 in about 10 months, I realized that I never wanted that to happen to somebody else. I never wanted that to happen again. And that if I went to a company that was not okay with me talking about the realities of being a woman in tech and some of the things that happen, then I didn't want to work for them anyway. Why would I want to work for them if they weren't going to support me that way? So, I mean, the good news was I did land myself in a place that was extremely supportive, and I started blogging online. I started, talking about the story and what we, what we could do to get our girls more involved. At the time, my daughter, I think, was about 4 or 5, and it was like heavy on my mind that I wanted her to really enjoy STEM, really like get into it. And so what I found, though, and I started blogging on Medium, which is like, if you haven't heard of it, it's like Twitter for blogging. And I see that question. I'm going to answer it a little later. This is good, though. That's a great question. in that, in Medium at the time, the way to get your stuff seen more was to include it in a publication. And at the time, there was only like maybe 2 or 3 women in tech publications on Medium, and they were very picky about what they wanted to include. So I was finding it hard to get my articles more widely seen. I wanted that because I was trying to make a difference. I wanted to like change society. So you need to be seen to do that. And so in January of 2015, I took a look at Medium and I was like, well, like, how hard is it to create your own publication, right? And with like one click, you could create a publication. So I did. So I'm already like halfway telling my story here, but so part of my frustrations when I wanted to create this was like in 2010, only 15% of Canadian first year students were female. I mean, that's terrible. It's gotten a little better since then, but not, tons. There was no place to share my story. There was no place to make it loud, to make it be seen by others. And we were very much so seeing what I call the STEM cliff, which was also the fact that at age 13, girls' interest in STEM dropped dramatically. The interesting part about that is their interest in STEM is the same at the age of 10 as it is 30. So if you've lived that part of your life already, you know that when you are 10, you don't care what people think about you. You're just going to do what you love. And when you're 30, you don't care about what people think about you. You're just going to do what you love. But in those in between years, you care very, very much. And so I thought, okay, well, if I create my own publication, maybe I could add more voice to that. And then I thought, oh my God, if I create a publication, I could try and amplify the voices of thousands of voices, not just my own voice. Like, who cares about my voice? Let's hear about everybody's experiences. And so that's how it started, and then I had to like look at where was the next problem. I needed writers. So I went and begged and borrowed my friends and said, please write for me. And I went on Medium and found other stories, please write for me. And then I was like, okay, still nobody's really seeing this. I need to build a social media presence. Okay. So that's the next problem to solve. So when I started this, I really didn't think I was going to create this huge thing. But by, looking at the next problem to solve and the next problem to solve, it steps you up from one place to the next and helps you. And building Code Like a Girl, for me, from a career perspective, is one of the ways I got my job at Arctic Wolf. Because actually, that's actually not even true. Sorry, let's go back. I started Code Like a Girl at the same time. But because I'd been active in the community and being loud and talking about this in the community is how I got noticed by one of the founders of Arctic Wolf and how I met her. But it has certainly helped my career. All right, so not all of us are going to go and build a giant publication. I may never do that again, and I don't even run it anymore. So that's like kind of a big thing. But all of us need to know how to spot the problems and get to the next step of our career. So let's talk about some examples of how you can do this in a corporation. So I'm going to bring up an example of how I did this at a past company. So I'm going to just set the stage on what the issue was. So the leadership team at the company wanted to be able to track everyone's work. And at the time, a lot of the dev teams were using different issue trackers. Like some teams were using Trello, and others were using like Fogbugs or something like that. And so they decided that they were gonna, like standardize across, and they chose to use a tool called Rally. And then they said, here you go, R&D, use Rally. And at the time I was a dev manager with one team of like 8 people in a in a development organization of probably about 150 people. So there's probably like 15, 20 teams. And I was like looking at this going, you're just gonna like give the tool to everyone and not give any kind of guidance and just say use it? Might not work. So what did senior lead? So it didn't work very well, right? Because senior leadership wanted, better metrics. They wanted to be able to track everybody across the board. But even though we were now all using one tool, we were all using it different ways. So things were happening differently. So now they're frustrated. They can't get those like roll up metrics that they wanted. We were talking oranges and apples because people were like using the tool differently, right? And so lots of bad communication, like when is this due? And they would look at the tool and try and figure that out. And in reality, the date we could hit was much, much different. And then of course we missed expectations, right? The tool might have been like telling them we might finish by this date, but because we weren't all using it the same way, it wasn't ending up like that. And so there was missed expectations on their side and blaming on the other. And I thought to myself, look, I have to figure out how my team's going to use this tool effectively. So I'm going to start there. And if you know me, I'm a little, like I might be a little bit of a process geek because I really, 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 really like thinking about how to make people effective without putting too much in their way, like adding just enough so that, you can enable them to succeed, but not enough that it's going to, bog them down in doing things for the man. So it's a balance there, right? And so I got that working for my team within a few weeks. And then I was part of like a group of 3 teams, my larger department. And I talked to those dev managers and I said, look, my team's using it this way. I think it would work a lot better if everyone was using this the same way throughout the organization. What do you think about how we're using it? And do you think you could use it that way as well? They gave me a little bit of feedback and, gave me some things where like, well, we really need this part of it. Okay. So we changed that, right? So I built my process. I talked to stakeholders and then I got them to commit. And I slowly did this over 6 months so that everyone in the R&D department, all of the other dev managers were using this tool in the same way. And that allowed us to be able to roll up information to senior leadership in a way that was comprehensible and it worked. So much so that they then asked me to lead the integration between our customer service tool and this tool. So ServiceNow and Rally. So what was I trying to do? I was trying to solve a problem for my team. Then I saw that as a problem for my department. Okay, let's try to solve it for the department. Okay, now that's a problem for the bigger team. Okay, let's try and solve it that way. And, I didn't do it by myself. I just led the effort to try and get it done. And what it did was it brought my visibility in the company all the way up to the C-level, right? And that was phenomenal for me. People around the company knew me. They knew that I was a go-getter. They knew I was going to get things done. If they wanted a project to succeed, they would come give it to me. And so that's why you want to do this as far as career building goes. It's not setting a path of clarity, like I'm going to do this, then this, then this, then this, and that's how I'm going to, build my career. Go solve the problems that other people aren't solving. And, you'll be looked at as the person who's, who really cares about the business, who's an innovator, who's really engaged, who gets stuff done, right? So in this example, I did it from being just a dev manager, right? So there was a lot of peer influencing that I had to do to try and make this work. My next example, and I do believe this is my last example, is from my time at Arctic Wolf a few years ago, actually. So when I started at Arctic Wolf, we were about 35 people in the company, and the dev team was 15 people. And I came in as the director of R&D, running the entire dev team. And that was great. And we had, so for those of you who don't know, because this will probably be helpful, what does Arctic Wolf do? So Arctic Wolf is a security operations as a service company. And so what we do is, like, my teams build this platform that our security engineers use to monitor our client environments and help them with their security posture and tell them when bad things happen. Okay. And so back when I started in 2015, there was like 15 developers and like 3 security engineers. And so we treated them as an extension of our development team, and we would build things for them, and then they would just like, try using them. And, it was fine. It didn't have to be perfect, didn't have to be beautiful. We were a scrappy startup. But, maybe a year and a half later, we were now a 30-person R&D team, and the security team was closer to 10 people. And all of a sudden, this like really collaborative experience that we had was starting to fall apart. So we have the security engineers and the development team, and now the development team is releasing stuff to the security engineers the way we used to, and they're getting frustrated. They're like, oh, I don't know how to use this. So then they're on Slack, or it wasn't Slack then, but we'll just say it's Slack now. That was a loud beep. I think there was a loud beep, but I think I'm okay. So we're just going to keep going. So I totally got off track, but I will get back to it. Okay, so the security engineers would get stuff, they wouldn't know how to use it, and so they would like Slack the development team, or they would walk by their desks and be like, I don't know how to use this thing. How do I use it? And so the development team started to feel like they were getting bombarded with questions, and the security engineers were frustrated because they didn't know who to talk to and they needed a fix. And then these would keep coming, and development would be like, this isn't important, I have to do this other thing. And so the security engineers would be like waiting there, trying to like needing an answer, but like we would never answer. And development team just felt like there was so much stuff coming our way. And then, inevitably mistakes happened, right? Because, the security engineers maybe didn't know how to use that part of the new software, or we released a bug and, we made a mistake on our side. And so what I ended up doing was, thinking through what could I do to alleviate the frustration on the development side, but at the same time, make sure we're properly supporting the security engineers, who are the people who are delivering the service that our customers are paying for, right? And so the solution came in the form of something called platform support, which actually today we've changed into pack support, because everyone loves being part of the wolf pack, and it was way catchier than platform support. So that's what it does. And the idea was, this group of people would be a very, very strong technical people who would sit in between the R&D team and the security engineering team. They would answer the questions and manage everything coming in. We implemented a ticketing system for the security engineers to submit tickets. And then the pack support team would be able to like answer them and try and answer them with their own with their own knowledge. And if they couldn't, then they would bring in the development team, right? So there was a clear process for how the security services team would communicate with R&D. There was many fewer mistakes, because also the pack support team was there to help explain it to the security engineer, so they had better support. There was reduced pressure on R&D because pack support was taking over some of their load, and there was just in general better product understanding. So That's where, I looked at, where the problems were happening. So you can do this from the bottom of your organization, and you can do this from like the middle, right? I ran R&D, but I certainly didn't run the security services team, but I did implement a process that the security services team had to follow. All right. So I want you to reflect on this for one moment. What issues are you going to tackle tomorrow? Or I think it's probably more apt to say Monday, since it's a Friday today at the end of the day. So take a moment and think about where the frustrations are in your organization, on your team. Where is bad communication happening in your team, with your teams, with teams that you work with? Where are mistakes being made in your organization, with your teams, with your friends? What are you hearing on the Slack channel? Where are people complaining about? Those are the places, those are the little like nuggets of gold that will help you find a place to start digging to solve problems. And that'll help you get your leg up, help you get seen in the organization, help you really get to that next level, right? So really think about it and decide what you're going to do, on Monday. So that is the end of the presentation. Now there are some questions on the side here. Every once in a while, people don't always have questions, so I help them with some frequently asked ones. But let's see here. We have some already going on the side here. So this one question is, you are very active on social media and have built a following around your style and culture. How important has that been to your cyber career? I would say it's actually been really important to my career in general. The social media came about because of Code Like a Girl. So I really built that up as something I was doing to help Code Like a Girl get visibility. And what ended up happening was it reflected back on me in a positive way. And so when I handed off Code Like a Girl, I realized that, I liked being, I liked sharing information with people. I like being a connector. And so I decided I would continue to try and have a social media presence outside of Code Like a Girl. And I think it's helped tremendously. I know so many more people in the whole wide world just because I do that. So do you have to do that? No, you totally don't have to do that. It's one way to build a network. You might argue in a COVID world, it's one of the only ways to build a network, but in everyday life, it's not the only way to build a network. Okay, then how did you navigate networking in cyber, and what are some of the tips you can share? Okay, so a couple things here. In the before times, which is what I call them now, I did go to a lot of networking events, mostly in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, and I went to a lot of the Women in Tech events. I helped champion the Women in Tech peer-to-peer group. That was a great way to meet a lot of people and continue to learn things and give back to the community a bit. And one of the things I noticed was if we had a technical speaker come in, I really enjoyed listening to them. And every once in a while, I also push myself to do a technical talk. And I realized that we actually had little to no security networking or events in the Waterloo region. And so that led me to the creation of the KW Cybersecurity Meetup. And so that we run monthly. We've been running it since 2017, and Arctic Wolf was happy to host it. And we now run it virtually, but going to things like that, going to places where they're talking about security and it's not just a networking event, right? You go, you learn something, and then while you're there, you say hi and you meet people. Can be a great thing to do. And there's across Canada, there's lots of things and lots of events going. I found that meetup.com is a great place to discover those things. And many people are still running those events virtually. So we can continue to do that. One day, I do hope to be in the same room with everyone here and actually talk to you face to face and not just a camera. I could be talking to 0 people right now. I have no idea. So it's all good. Okay. I'm not confident as a speaker. I understand cyber tech, but I'm just not the best in front of a crowd. How can I take some small steps to build my capacity? Okay. So imposter syndrome on knowing security content. I do know a little bit about that. So I work on the software development side of security, right? And a lot of my yes, I have a master's degree in cybersecurity. So at one point it was extremely technical, but I have been leading people for the last 15 years. And so, I'm not going in and I've never worked in a SOC myself. I've never done any of those things, right? So I'm constantly working on keeping up to date. And the best way I have found to keep up to date on what's happening in cybersecurity is podcasts. I listen to them a lot, although a little bit less during COVID because I listen to them in the car and there's nowhere to drive. So, but some key podcasts that I listen to all the time are the Cyberwire, Darknet Diaries. What's that one called? Smashing Security, because it's hilarious. It's hilarious and you learn something. And I think there's one more that I listen to. Security Now. Security Now will take you deep into what's happening. It's like a 2-hour one. So you have to get a little committed for that one. But the other ones are a lot shorter and easier to digest. So this fall, I was asked to be a regular commentator, cybersecurity commentator on some podcasts myself. And I started freaking out because I'm like, but what, like, I don't know everything about cybersecurity. How am I going to do this? You know what I do? I prep for it every week, right? So I'm confident in my ability to learn things. I'm confident in my ability to go and read up on stuff and understand it quickly, right? You can't just ask me anything about cybersecurity and I give you an answer. I don't have all of the answers in my head. I just don't. But I can surely prep for it. And, my experience and my knowledge knows that I can talk to it intelligently, but I do need to read up about it a little bit right beforehand to refresh my memory or to learn something new about it. So don't think that you have to know everything before you go up and give a talk. One of the first security talks I did was a talk about ransomware. And the reason I decided to do the talk was because I didn't know anything about ransomware. This is about 4 years ago. And so you teach yourself how to learn something real quick when you have to go speak about it. And now I know a fair bit about ransomware, but that talk was really where I learned it. And then went and gave it. So I think there's always that thing, like when you go teach, you learn something better. So, yeah, there's a whole other section of talking about being a confident speaker, but that's like in a whole nother ball of wax. And for me, it's something I love to do. But I've taken courses and I've learned, and I continue to hone that as well. I think anybody who just wants to share something interesting, get up and get out there and give it a shot. Okay, interesting point on security engineers working hand in hand with development team. What should be the focus of small size companies who cannot afford both the roles? Can you share some insight into it? Okay, so Arctic Wolf is a little special there, right? Because we're building software for our security engineers to use to deliver a security service. A regular company, would potentially, there's a couple ways they can go, right? They can buy security software and then hire people to run it. So they're more going to be looking at like just hiring the security engineers. Or if they're huge and they want to, they can try and do this where they have developers building stuff and security engineers working on it. Generally, if you're a smaller company, like even the smallest SOC, so Security Operations Center, is going to cost about $1.5 million a year to run, and you need about 12 security engineers to do it. So most of the time, if you can't afford that, then what you do is you go with a service like Arctic Wolf, because we do it for you for a much like smaller fraction of that cost. One of the interesting things that we do is we have security engineers in the R&D team to help us build it, right? A lot of the people, the software developers that we hire, they don't have security backgrounds. I mean, trying to find software developers with lots of security background is like trying to find unicorns. I mean, that doesn't really exist. Like there's a handful of them, but you're never going to be able to build all of the security and all the things you need by only finding those people. So we have another security engineers that work within the R&D team to help guide us on how to build things and what to do with them, basically. We still have a few more minutes. I don't see any more questions coming in as of yet. I can go with one of these ones. I have no idea if you guys want me to or not. So I guess like a common question. Okay. Oh, some good books or podcasts. Okay. So I already said the podcast, but I can list them again. Cyberwire, Smashing Security, Darknet Diaries. It's super campy, but you get to hear stories of hacks and stuff like that. It's really interesting. It's kind of it's a fun listen. And Naked Security. No, Security Now. Never mind. Security Now. That is another one though, but I haven't listened to it, so I can't recommend it. Okay, and then books. I just finished reading The Perfect Weapon by David E. Sanger. Fantastic cybersecurity book, and just like knowing how the world works today, right? Basically, war is happening in cyberspace right now, all the time. So that one's really, really interesting. If you're looking for a great book on career, I highly recommend Forever Employable by Jeff Gofflife. The idea there is to stop having to, it's to start having people come to you to find, like, for you to work for them, right? And how do you do that? And it's not all that different from this like formula that I'm kind of giving here, but the next step to it is kind of becoming an expert in some area and becoming known for that, and then people will come to you a lot. It's super quick read, very digestible. When I read it, I was just like, oh my God, this is what I did with Code Like a Girl. You've just put that onto paper, which is fantastic. And then if you are leading development teams at all, then I highly recommend the Phoenix Project and the follow-on book to that, which is the Unicorn Project. It's written in novel form, but basically how you build effective teams in that. So any best practices for applying the formula to business services? Absolutely. So it's always about looking for where the frustrations are and the bad communication and the mistakes. It doesn't matter who the two parties are, right? Whether it's consumers out there on their own or it's one team and another team, right? So if your company is building a tool that other businesses are using, what you want to do is you want to go and see, okay, when those businesses are using our tools, what are their frustrations? What are they annoyed with? Or if you're going into a new industry, what are the frustrations of that industry today? What can't they do effectively today? And if you build the thing that allows them to do that more effectively, reduces, bad communication, reduces mistakes, then you're going to have a winning product, right? So it's always about looking into those places where the frustration might be happening, right? So for business to business, you could also, potentially watch LinkedIn feeds or look at Reddit feeds for those businesses, right? Where would people complain? Where would Twitter's a great place if you can find the right people. Like, people complain on Twitter all day. But if you were, say, wanting to improve the parts of the airline industry, you could easily find lots of places where people complain, Facebook and all that stuff. So it's you got to get a little creative on where you're looking. Find out the places where people complain. In the office, it's usually the water cooler, right? Which these days is Slack, but that's how that usually plays out. So another question people will have sometimes is like, once I've identified a problem or like a potential issue to solve, like inside of a company, like what do I do with that? Great, I found the problem. What in the world do I do? And that it does depend a little bit on the situation, but you want to have like some thought around it. You could start asking, once you've identified the problem, start asking your coworkers, like, hey, I noticed this is a problem. What do you think about it? What do you think would solve it? You can, have some of those conversations with the people who are involved. And once you maybe get a better sense and have a potential solution, you just have to have one idea. You could potentially go to your boss or the person who's in charge of that and say, hey, I noticed there's a big problem here. One of the ways we could fix it is to do X, Y, Z. And if we did that, then maybe it would improve. What do you think? And they might come back and say, yeah, I see that problem and I'm not sure I like your idea, but let's think about that more, right? So the goal isn't for you to come in and save the day like some crazy like hero. It's to bring and bubble up the problems, but not just bubble them up and complain about them, bubble them up and offer suggestions, offer ways to solve the problem, and offer to help dig into that once it is there. All right. I'm not sure. I don't think I missed any. Are there any other questions or things you guys would be interested to hear? I'll give it a minute. Okay, has your experience been that this is better or worse for operation rather than product development? So I'm assuming, I'm a little bit confused, but I'm assuming you mean, in my experience, does the formula work better or worse for operations or product development? I think it works for both. It really is depending. Okay, like improving processes and obstacles rather than solutions to solve an observed problem. Yeah, so what the formula is doing is like, it's trying to find the problem, right? Like, it's giving you an a clear way to figure out where problems are, whether they're in a product or whether they're in a development organization or any organization. And then to solve it, it is a slightly different skill set, but it works in both places to find the problems. Solving it comes into just asking more questions about it and trying to really understand the problem that's there, and then looking at how you could solve it. And a lot of the times, like, it's really great to bring in a few people, like, be collaborative. You don't have to solve these problems by yourself. You just need to be the one that goes out there and says, hey, I think there is a problem and I think we should do something about it. And then start working with others to do it. So I think it works just as well for both. Personally, I've seen it used in both settings. It's a great question, though. See if there's any more. I think there's about 5 minutes left here. You guys cannot understand how unnerving it is to give a talk to just the camera. So okay, I think that might be it. So I think we will probably wrap it up there, and you guys can have 5 minutes to get to the next thing. I'm not sure if there's another talk after mine. Is there? No idea. There is. Excellent. Okay, so let's wrap it up there. One more at 6. So come on back at 6 and you guys can check out another awesome talk. Thank you for being a great crowd. Thank you for asking me questions while I speak to the void. That was fantastic.